Hi, everybody. LinkedIn Live. Welcome to Far From Timid's Work From Heart show. It's about paths to greatness. And I'm so honored to have Steve Gross, the Chief Marketing Officer of University of Phoenix, with us today. Steve, are you in Phoenix right now?
No, New Jersey.
Oh, you're in Jersey. Great, great, great. Anyway, so I have known Steve for a really long time as a client and as a mentor. And one of the things that struck out most to me over the years is his leadership and his ability to inspire teams. And I think during this important transformational era where companies are having a lot of difficulty with retention and keeping employees, I thought it would be great to hear from Steve about his special kind of magic. But first, I want to talk about, you are a huge fan of the Mets, I know, and they're having like a crazy season. And so, yeah, what are you kind of freaking out? Are you?
Yeah, I'm happy about it. First of all, thanks for the kind words, Alona, and I am happy about it. Just a lot of positive things happening, and I'm into it because it's sort of a generational thing. My father was into it, so I'm into it. My kids now are into it, so it's a connector, and it's fun to be part of something bigger than I am,
Yeah. And
something I can control.
yeah, and they have this kid, Brett Beatty or something.
Oh yeah, that was
I'm
incredible.
not lefty, so I'm like, he's a lefty. So I was like,
Yeah,
woo.
yeah. And for those who don't know, this so that they brought up this young player, and literally on his very first swing in the major leagues, he had a home run, and his family was there. They drove from Texas to Atlanta, and it was just check it out. It was really very. No matter if you're who you're a fan of, it was what dreams are made of. Very exciting.
So great. Over the past 5 years, the role of, we're just going to get into it, actually.
Sure.
I'm just going into it. The role of the CMO has really changed over the years, and it's a balancing act between tech, data, culture, and innovation. So, in your day to day, how do you balance that?
Yeah. First of all, you're right. It's unbelievable the degree to which the marketing discipline has changed over the course of my career. And all of those things that you mentioned are a huge part of my world, and I would imagine all marketers' worlds these days. Um, Tech and data is a much bigger part of what we do because it's so much more available, and I feel like those two things go together. Like
Yep.
tech itself is an enabler, and the data, frankly, is an enabler too, and usually need both of those. So we spend a lot of time on both tech and data strategies, first party data, and how things are changing is a real opportunity for us. You mentioned culture as well. That's a big one for me. I mean, culture is probably the lead horse in many respects for me, and maybe we'll talk about that some more. And innovation, I feel, is perhaps an outcome of all the things we just talked about. Uh,
100%.
but Alona, the other thing I would say though is as much as as much has been that has changed, there are some timeless things that will always be there. You know, there's no substitute for a crisp message creatively articulated, period, full stop. It's like the channels in which that gets communicated and the technology in which that gets communicated, those things are changing, but the idea of a motivating story, a motivating value proposition, a motivating message, those things are timeless, and I spend a lot of time on that and always will.
Absolutely. And I think, especially in the day to day in my world, we look at data, but we also have to listen to our instinct, because if you want to be innovative, you can't just look at data, right? You have to also use your instinct and sometimes throw the hat over the fence,
Yep.
right? I mean, you can't, and I do, but I do know that the best work that I've ever done has been with CMOs that I feel are inspiring, and that has always been the case. Whether, I was at Marriott working with Karin Timpone and, working with you, when we did our work together, or LexisNexis, but it's always been having a supported CMO who has a vision, who empowers their teams in really generous ways. So, but you're right. I think the idea of, like, you can have all the great tech and all the great data, but if you don't have the right story or the right message, then what's really the point,
Yep.
Over the course of your career, you've gone, you were at LexisNexis, and then you started to move into education. But as a CMO, you've remained relevant for so long and passionate about your work. I think that's really the question, because there are a lot of CMOs that go from company to company to company, but it's about the passion and it's about the inspiration behind this role. So, what do you attribute your relevancy to and your inspiration behind, this chief marketing officer role that you've had for over 20 years, I guess?
Yeah. Well, actually, I began my marketing education by spending a pretty significant period of time at Pepsi, where I got my sort of CPG, foundation. I would say an important part of the game for me, speaking personally, is that I feel strongly that there should be an important purpose to what I do. That's why I made the choice, 10 or 12 years ago, to enter the education space professionally. I've always been passionate about it personally, always. And I turned that into my profession. As a matter of fact, Alona, you know what? My mom was a teacher and my dad was a salesman. So I kind of feel like now I'm honoring both of them. And that makes me feel good. So, I feel like working in an area of passion helps you keep your edge. And then I think the other thing is being surrounded by people who fill in, your holes, that like, the gaps that I have in knowledge and things like that. I'm very comfortable hiring people who are more knowledgeable than me. I'm sure in that regard. And that's just good. It's just, I'm sure we'll talk about that more. And the last thing is maintaining your sense of curiosity. It's critical, I think, for a successful marketer. I mean, I read a lot. I'm always like hunting around for new ideas and bouncing ideas off people, and 9 out of 10 of them aren't really relevant. But just the process, the act of doing that, I think, is a healthy thing. And I think they would say the same thing. So those are I think, the key ingredients, Alona.
I love what you said about how, like, your mom was a teacher and your dad was a salesman, how you feel like you've connected the dots that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's, the show is work from heart. I mean, that's really what this is about. And it's really interesting because throughout my career, I also have heard, when we're in the rush of like getting deadlines out, people are like, well, we're not curing cancer. We're not curing cancer, those kinds of things. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, well, okay, we're not curing cancer, but we are doing something important. There's a marketplace and we are helping people understand what products and services are available to them. And we're helping these companies, these innovative companies, to grow or to connect to audiences. And to me, maybe maybe we're not curing cancer, but to me, there is a passion around that. And there is some nobility to that. Anyway, but I love what you said about how you connected those dots. So I know we talked before about the CMO's role and how compounded it is today with, a CMO's role was never about technology, but now it is about technology because you have to have your platforms connected in the customer experience, right?
Yes.
And so I've often thought about how there are 3 different types of CMOs, like an archetype. There's some CMOs that are, they're just innovative and they want to just do crazy stuff and whatever the cost, let's do it. Then these are just archetypes. So when I talk about this, I think all the CMOs at least I've ever worked with have different levers of each, right? They're calibrated differently. So there's one CMO that's, just real visionary and it's just like doing crazy stuff. Then there's sort of the data-driven CMO that's really like looking at the numbers and, prove to me.
Right.
And then there's the CMO that's just an incredible, inspiring leader. And, do you connect with any of those? Like, which one do you think you are? It's like a game show question.
Alona, I would say, after you say the obvious, well, you need to do all 3. You have to say it because there's a degree of truth to it. But I know your question really is, if you had to pick one that's sort of your leading, sort of descriptor. For me, it would be the third one you said, and that is inspiring people. And I spend a huge amount of time on people. I view that as my primary job. And I'm not trying to say that in that trite sort of way that, people's eyes glaze when they hear it. What I mean to say is, I spend a huge amount of time recruiting people, and always have time for them. In other words, my job is to remove obstacles from them. As you progress and become more senior in an organization, your time horizon becomes longer. So, I focus on a lot of long-term things, but I also focus on trying to remove barriers from the people who I work with to help make their job, go more smoothly. I feel like that's an important part of what I do. Maybe the other thing to say is you cannot lead by authority, in my opinion, or at least I've never been successful at it. It just doesn't work because you may have authority in someone's eyes, but you don't have credibility in their eyes until you earn it. And the way you earn credibility in someone's eyes is by persuading them on the merits. So I spend a lot of time selling internally to the team. And when I say selling, that doesn't mean my way and here and selling. No, what I mean is it's sort of like, let's build the aligned plan and then let's communicate it broadly in the organization. I'm very confident that the University of Phoenix, that the marketing organization has a high degree of alignment around what our priorities are. And if you asked anyone, the answer would be more similar than different to the next person, which is something I take pride in because it's what, we really focus on that a lot. And I feel like it's absolutely worth it to persuade people of the merits of what we're doing on their terms, not mine. It doesn't matter what I say, it matters what they hear and what they feel. And to me, that's leadership. It's making sure you have the right people around the table, developing them, removing obstacles, and then building an aligned team and aligned vision, that everyone feels ownership of and driving the heck out of it.
Right. Obviously, yes. And, as CEO of my own agency, it's the same thing. There are times where, sometimes there might not be alignment, but we have to get things done too, right? So there's sometimes when that happens and it's those are tough calls also because,
well, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast.
yes.
It's like, it takes more time to do what I'm describing, but I have experienced that has enabled us to kind of turbocharge our progress, which we're making, and it's kind of worth it.
Yeah. So I consider you like a turnaround CMO.
Okay.
And for those who might have just joined, we are here on FarFromTimid's live show called Work from Heart, where we talk about paths to greatness. And we are here with Steve Gross, the CMO of University of Phoenix. But welcome to all of you who just joined. Tell me about, being a turnaround CMO. I think every CMO is now a turnaround CMO because we're in this era of transformation. But a lot of the roles that you took were kind of moving a really big ship. And I think there's a certain personality that goes with that kind of role, right? There's a lot of unknowns involved. To me, there's a kind of fearlessness, I think, and confidence that goes with that kind of role, especially in big companies that are involved in these turnarounds. So, tell me, for those, not just marketers, but everyone out there who is a leader or an aspiring leader, what do you think about your path has made you successful? And what can you offer to people out there in terms of the ability to take on such grand responsibilities?
Well, Alona, I like the idea of either building things or fixing things. And when I talk about a turnaround, I'm usually talking about a business that is maybe in decline or facing market factors that are threatening. And I do enjoy that because there is a freedom that comes with the fact that the status quo is an unacceptable place to be. And that change is not only expected, but it's required. It makes that whole thing that I was talking about a few minutes ago easier because it's like, I do need to persuade you that this path's the right one, but I don't need to persuade you that hard that our current path is not a winner. And they brought me in for a reason kind of deal, and I'm not a new sheriff in town kind of guy, but it helps me do those things we just talked about in terms of, building the right team, developing that team around a shared set of ideas that are, I think, easier to kind of get going on when you know that change is absolutely required. I like it. And nowadays, it's to your point that maybe there's a difference, I think, between what I think you're calling a transformation and a turnaround. There's probably a lot of overlap there, but for sure, people are facing pretty massive changes to the way they go to market and need to tap into that kind of thinking going forward.
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was because, in terms of your temperament as a CMO is really inspiring to me. And I know that I have gone to different companies also to do turnarounds, as a turnaround creative. I do know that they have hired me for specific things, right? They saw that I do X and they hire me for X, and then I go in to do X, and then sometimes they're like, don't do X. So, and I know a lot of people experience that kind of thing. And so how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you deal with that when let's say you've been hired for a specific thing, and then you go in there and then you are trying to move in a certain direction, right? Your North Star. And then the thing that you were hired to do it's actually, maybe some companies aren't ready yet, or because the people inside the company are not ready yet. You kind of have to balance what people are ready for. Do you know what I'm talking about?
You know what you mean. Listen, I think that if you're going to come in as a head of marketing, it's really important to get alignment with your CEO before you even join. That's important. So you need to make sure that you've got the support of the CEO, and I believe in your other peers too, to have the degrees of freedom that are required to get the job done. Assuming that you have that, then I do think it's about the kind of stuff we talked about before. It's like I feel like when you come into a job, there are sort of people who fit into maybe three categories. They're the people who are on the team presently that are keepers. There are people who are buried in the organization who are hidden treasures that need to be elevated. And then there are people that just aren't going to work, and you need to bring in you need to bring in people, or there might also be a situation where there just is a requirement for a new set of capabilities that didn't exist previously, and you typically would have to import that into the organization. So getting that right is like huge, and that's like task one. And then and that takes time. And here's the other thing, Alona. I am not a believer in reorganizing. Like that is like, I mean, like when I came into the University of Phoenix, we did need to do it because it was the marketing function was so disconnected from the rest of the university that we needed to create a product marketing function that bridged that gap. But it was very difficult. It was really hard. And but here's the thing. All right, so that was a couple years ago. It takes time for teams to gel. It takes time for people to trust each other. It takes time for me to be able to finish your sentences because I know what you're thinking. Like that is so valuable. And I feel like the reorganizing crowd, dramatically underestimates that, and they mistake reorganizing organization structure for real progress because it feels like activity. But my is that most people change is actually bad. Even good people change, if that makes sense, because it breaks so many things. So things that make sense in a conference room or on a PowerPoint deck, they have to like, usually that positive benefit is dwarfed by the negative repercussions of the change. Like, listen, I'm sure the people who are watching this, this event have all been part of some organization thing or another. And your first thing you figure out is how it affects me. And, and then you figure out what your new team is. And, that's all you're focusing on for months. Like, what's the good part about that again? So like, if I would say I resist the urge to change organization structure. That doesn't mean I don't make moves on people, or I don't make, minor, I don't make some adjustments. Of course, that's the nature of the beast. But fundamentally, we got that squared away, and we've kept it the way it is. And I'm sure that's, been a success factor for us.
Right, like taking teams, and then if there is a skills gap, then that's the whole reason why people stay in jobs, because they learn new things, they progress, they grow. So you don't change those people out, you just teach them new things, right? I mean, that's
or you just right, or you got to keep. Listen, everybody's dealing with the massive seismic changes that are occurring in the labor marketplace right now. But we've done a pretty good job of holding on to people. How? By first of all, they feel good about being part of such a team. Number one, people want their opinions to be valued, their expertise to be valued. They want to be part of a winning team. They want to be like contributing in a authentic and positive way. And then to your point, sometimes pretty much always, you need to make sure that people have the opportunity to continue growing oftentimes let's continue growing in their role. How do you give them new challenges? How do you give them additional responsibilities? It's part of the deal.
What else? I think you kind of answered this question, but maybe just if we can go in a little tiny bit deeper into the culture when there is transformation. And so you're not a reorg CMO, you keep people in place, you upskill them, you empower them, and you let them grow, which is, I agree with that. What else contributes to a positive working environment during these times of transformation, right? So there's that part, right, which is really important. I think that is the most important. But are there other elements in terms of like management protocols that you felt have been successful for you that you can share with us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel, Alona, that you ever hear that quote? You might as well be you because everyone else is taken. You've heard that, right? And the point I'm making there is, and this took me like years to learn, truly, is my son would say this, be you. Like he always says that, which is whatever. He's right. And where I'm going with that is, for a long period of time, I felt like the work me wasn't really the same person as the real me, if that makes sense. Yep. I put up a different kind of front when I was working, and I realized over time that first of all came at high cost to me because it's exhausting to do that. But second of all, it also probably limited the degree of loyalty or connectedness that I had with people at work. And I guess it was some aha moment way back when. I don't know, whatever. But it just became, it's like, people value authenticity and they can sniff it out in about 0.8 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I do that. So I do that. You know that. I mean,
I love that you said that. I think yes, I totally.
Right. So that like characterizes how I engage with people, and it's a win. So like, okay, so this, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but like this. So this morning I wore a Mets Hawaiian shirt at our acquisition meeting. And why did I do that? Because there are people in.
Why didn't you wear it to the show, Steve? I mean,
my wife and daughter said it would not be.
Okay.
But the point is that, like, I did, it's like, hey, and then we're just goofing, I'm goofing. These are my peers, like, whatever. It's, right. And it's just a good way, people are people and people follow people. That's the way it is, all right? People don't follow anything other than people, usually.
Right. They don't follow, right.
But most of it, like in our situation, it's like people don't remember what you say. They remember how they feel when you say it. And so like, creating that authentic environment that people can relate to, that, I'm just saying that's what works for me. The other people are very successful doing it their way. I'm not saying my way is the only way. I'm sure it's not.
Right. But I do think something that I've been thinking about over the past couple of days, as I've been preparing for this, but just not for this show in particular, but the idea of corporate culture, like who created it, right? Like, I mean, I think when I was growing up in the world, it's like there was a certain kind of corporate culture, right? And especially as me being a woman, I made sure that I had to I don't know if conform is the right word, but I did have to conform a lot. And, over the past, 5 years, I've been on this journey, and I'm just like, and as you like to say, let Alona be Alona, right? Like that's from the West Wing episode, right? Let Bartlett be Bartlett.
Right?
But I think that's something, if there's one thing that anyone can get out of today's show, to me, it's really that. And I think that I mentor a lot of people, and I know that that's people's biggest struggle, is being comfortable with themselves inside of the corporate structure. And so I don't want to say like to hell with corporate culture or F corporate culture. I don't mean that. I'm just saying I think we need to drop corporate from the word corporate culture. Like it's just culture. There's no, I mean, what are companies? Companies are a bunch of human beings, right? We're all humans, and we're all just bumbling around trying to do our best, right? So,
but I tell you, Alona, yet hard yes to everything you were saying. I would suggest that, I mean, every organization has a culture, period. They do. And it is, what's that word? Like it's unrealistic to think that like a CMO can come in and change that quickly, or it's like maybe you can. My belief is that I try to get these things done assess what the culture is, and succeed within that culture, and and nudge it along, and as we change, and that, I think that's been a success formula. But I got to tell you, when you were just describing things, I was thinking about the way culture has changed over the course of my career. So check this out. So I started at Pepsi.
okay.
I'm not going to when, because I have to lie. But here is the uniform that you would wear. Talk about conformity at Pepsi back in the day. Guys, blue suit, gray suit. I'm done. Shirts, white or blue. I'm done. Tie, which you had to wear. Red,
Okay.
blue. I'm done. Shoes, black. I'm done. How crazy is that? And this is for a this is for a company that is totally successful and creative, but like, talk about conformity, that was a thing. Fast forward to today, it's like I'm like a crazy
Hawaiian shirt.
yeah, so like I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt, but like me
Hawaiian shirt wearing CMO.
right, but I'm like wearing this, that like qualifies me as the best dressed person, like around. Wearing a button down shirt that's passable. Obviously I'm wearing shorts and no shoes. No, I'm barefoot, like obviously.
Right.
Yeah, obviously, but it's just it's really changed a lot, and in that respect, I think it's changed for the better.
Yeah, I do too. I definitely feel like, yes, I have an unusual style. And so I've found a way to incorporate my style into the workplace, right? There's some modifications, but I do feel super comfortable now because I wanted to embrace my own vision and my own comfort, right? It's personal expression. So I think, not just dress, but being comfortable in your own skin is about what you're wearing. It's about how you're speaking, and to have that comfort level. Anyway, but has changed over the past. It has changed.
To your point, people can sense that when it's real, and they can sense it when it's not.
Yep.
And I do think there's a lot to be said for that, and people value it.
So it's it's about 3 o'clock. We have about 25 minutes left. I just wanted to, if anybody has any comments or questions for Steve, you can let us know in the chat, and I will, stop around 3:15 and ask Steve some of these questions that you guys have. So, yeah. So, Steve, you and I have worked on, I'm just going to segue into something that I've wondered, but we've worked on a few large projects, transformational projects together. And I always found it really interesting how you're able to support your team and your agencies at the same time. That is a very difficult proposition. So how do you do it?
Well,
not that the agency and the teams are at odds, but there are moments where I'm just not that they're at odds, but I think it's
well, you gotta
dance.
Yeah, well, you hire agencies for a reason, because they can do something that you feel like your organization can't do. And I totally feel like they are part of the team, and like a lot, like, and spend, it's kind of like, that's it. They're part of the team. I mean, they it's conditional. Everything's conditional. Everyone has to perform, whether they're an employee or an agency. That's I never love when people say, it's a family. Families are unconditional. The work is conditional. You got to perform. But with that said, it's like you can agency people are people too.
Right,
And
right.
they want to be part of something bigger, just like we all, everyone does. So I spend a lot of time, talking through where we're going, but So, I work hard with our agencies, and I think, and I'm not necessarily the person who deals most directly with our agencies on a day-to-day basis, but I'm confident that the people who do act the same way. And they and I have all hands meetings every month. They're invited. It's like, hey, come on in. The water's fine. And I think they feel a little more connected. There's less, there's just less of the game of telephone that's usually pretty damaging. Like when you say something that gets passed along, that's like, that comes out the other end, not the way it should be. But anyway, and the other thing, Alona, is it may not sound this way in this conversation because I'm talking so much, but I really am. But my job is way more about asking questions and about providing answers. You know what? Like when you're a senior leader, try this on. The more senior you get in an organization, the fewer decisions you make. And what I mean by that, that's not to say that the decisions you make are bigger, but they're less about the decisions. They're more about the direction. Follow me? So in other words, the person flipping burgers at McDonald's probably makes more decisions within 15 minutes than the chairman of the board, who's setting direction and prioritizing things like that, but not really making decisions. So what I do is I ask a lot of questions of the people who are responsible for making decisions, testing their thinking and pushing them. Curiosity is a good thing. And
that's it. Curiosity. That's your magic.
It's also,
that's your
curiosity is a part of it. And the other thing is asking questions and genuinely listening hard for the answers. Like not just being quiet, but listening hard. And trying to process what's being said, and just pushing for clarity, and that sharpens everyone's blade.
I love that.
And that's totally the case with our agencies. I mean, whenever I meet with them, it's like question time, and it's I think it's helpful.
So it sounds like a lot of transparency, right? Yeah. There's a lot of transparency with your agencies, and your teams, obviously, and in general, just curiosity in general, just really making sure you're not micromanaging in any way. You're setting the direction, but to me, it's the transparency and the curiosity and the listening that really makes it work in terms of balancing, in terms of completing whatever initiative you have successfully in partnership with an agency, right?
Well, but Alona, the context matters. Okay, so like we talked a few minutes ago about turnarounds. Well, if you're coming into a situation that's broken, or it's just problematic, in the beginning you might need to be much more involved, much more, meaning a person like me might much more involved, much more directive, much more uh, making a lot of decisions. But over time, you want to get to a point where especially with a larger organization, startups are always going to be the person making decisions. But in larger organizations like what I'm part of now, then it's a little bit about trying to get to that point that I was saying earlier, where you're surrounded by the right people, they're kicking ass, but you're pushing them, asking good hard questions, not for gotcha moments, but for like, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And doing it privately usually, so it's like there's an informality and a collegiality to it, and works.
Yeah, no, I've learned, I personally have learned a lot from you. So that was a lot of conversation about the internal sort of arteries of being a CMO, like the sort of personal part of being a CMO, being a successful CMO. Then there's also the more like practical side that I just thrown a few questions about that. But Mark Pritchard from Procter & Gamble talks about ensuring brands have a forever plan. And, I think to me, it's always been really interesting, this battle between brand marketing and performance marketing. And to me, I think everything's performance marketing, whether you're on the brand or performance, all performance. But CMOs have to show the money. They have to show the companies the money, like every quarter. It's the way that their review, the company reviews are set up. The CMOs have to show performance all the time, but yet it's really important to build brand trust. And you can't build brand trust just by having performance marketing, like buy me, selling, sort of those product driven marketing. So I guess my question to you is, how do you balance the short-term goals and kind of like the long-term forever plan? I mean, or are they combined? I mean, how do you?
I think they are combined, which is what you said earlier. It's kind of like, to me, it's all performance marketing. So in my situation, I work for a university. We we pretty much operate, we operate on, a wide variety of upper funnel media, but, and spend a, good amount of money on conversion oriented media, demand generation type stuff, and then demand capture kind of stuff. And it all, so I'm evaluated, and I evaluate on the basis of how much did it cost to generate a lead, how much did it cost to convert that lead, and it's like in the situation I'm in, it's a line job, not a staff job, if that makes sense to you. Like if the marketing engine's not working, we're screwed. And it'll never work, because there's very concrete numbers about that we want to do, and that our expectations done the right way, efficiently, effectively, and appropriately, and that covers what you're calling brand, and it covers what you're calling, it's just performance marketing.
Mm-hmm.
What I have said to our organization is, like, I'm not that up for like doing pure brand advertising.
Right, like that just evokes a feeling or something,
Which, by
right?
the way, but the University of Phoenix is, known for that, frankly. Very emotional kind of advertising, great storytelling. But I think the shift that we've made is more towards tapping into that great storytelling capabilities that the team has, but directing it in a more in a way that resonates more directly with people making the decision to go back to school. And the results have followed, which is really encouraging. um, I think the other thing is, people have less and less tolerance for being sold to. Like, listen, I don't want to be that guy who's like, thou doth protest too much. I don't want to be that guy, because we spend a lot of money, so we do. Okay. And that's for paid media of all types. But one of our very biggest priorities that we've made good progress on is on content marketing and SEO. And the idea there is, it's like, hey, let's create lots of content by the University of Phoenix that's not necessarily about the University of Phoenix.
Yep.
But that is really helpful to people as they make decisions in a high stakes type decision, that they're, about going back to school. That's not a small thing. That's a big thing. If you're a single parent with, kids and a modest income, and you want to, step up and advance your career, like going back to school, that's not a small decision. It's big. And we need to help people along the way that maybe 15 or 30-second paid advertisement can do. And we have people who, enrollment reps who are amazing at helping people through that. But getting into the enrollment rep is really important, and helping them through that decision on their terms, because people are less into the phone right now. So,
right, like what's the value exchange?
What's the value exchange? Exactly.
Right.
What's the value exchange? We're so there's got to be a value exchange, and pure, so content marketing, that's value. If it's good content, that's value. Brand advertising, less so. Like brand advertising in that traditional sense.
Right.
So
And
that's the case.
sorry.
That's my experience here.
I want to just, it's really, I love that you just said that, because, and we do have a question. I'm going to get to the audience questions in 1 second. But in terms of value exchange and creating marketing and content that is not about the brand, but that adds value to the audience, right? Like that's really the thing. It's, at the end of the day, you're trying to build community, really, right? You people who are, a community of people. Obviously they are your customers, but to me it's really a community. Where are people's attention? What's very interesting to me is that, and I don't think we're going to have time to talk about it today, but I did want to say that with Web3, there are a lot of like Web3 native companies who are very, very good at, they have all the 3D technology and they know how to do the crypto and the mining, but they also are touting themselves as marketers. But the kind of marketing that they're doing has been I'm watching it. They are doing marketing from like 20 years ago. They are marketing their clients basically like doing advertising, like look at me, look at me, look at me type advertising. And I can't wait to write about that. But that to me is like a very interesting thing to watch.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, those, like you were mentioning, the crypto companies, and they, I think, are pretty reliant on celebrity advertising. Well, now that things have taken a turn, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think
yeah,
it's it's that kind of situation that turnaround situation that we were talking about earlier that kind of really
Right.
very focused.
And I love Accenture, and I love David Droga. I love the whole company. With the Coinbase ad that they did for the Super Bowl, everyone, I mean, I know it got a lot of press, but to me, it was just a QR code, and it just asked people to join. So to me, there was like zero value exchange, and there was no journey around it. They just literally put a QR code, then they sign up, and meanwhile it broke. But what's the journey after that? That to me is like they had this whole opportunity to build and this huge net to create this gigantic experience ongoing post Super Bowl, and it didn't happen. But anyway, I want to read a question. This is from Christian Davies. Hi, Christian. So he wrote, the revolving door of CMOs is kind of crazy right now, and the market seems to have less and less patience. Against this backdrop, it feels like we are polarized between safe CMOs who stick around for ages and game changers who never get enough time. Do you feel like there's any appetite for bold thinking or risk taking anymore?
I do. I think, Christian, that the massive changes in the marketing landscape require that. Sometimes there's risk in moving too slow, and I think this is one of those moments. I mean, Google postponed their cookie initiative until the following year, but like you got to get ahead of that one, right? So you got to get ahead of that whole deal. There's obviously massive changes in viewing, in viewership. Like I thought a year ago, I was concerned about the reduction in eyeballs available for advertising supported media, at least upper funnel. But look what happened. Now Netflix is going ad supported. Disney's going to go ad supported. It's probably going to be more ad supported impressions available now than ever. So it's like things are changing, and just sort of like kind of moving too slow to me feels like more of a risk than moving too fast, if that makes sense. I mean, you got to be thoughtful and all. So, look, and to the underlying spirit of your question, marketing is that the CMO role has always had the reality of a pretty short leash and a lot of turnover, sadly. But that's the reality, and I'd say the key to that, or at least the way to address it to me, has been get others in on it. In other words, the less that it's my idea, and the more that it's our idea. And I'm talking about the organization as a whole, including the CEO, including the other parts of the C-suite, and including the broader marketing organization. Then it becomes more ingrained in the fabric of the organization, and it's as opposed to like, Steve's off doing his own thing and it's not working. See ya. So you want to, that's probably the best way to inoculate, especially when in a time of great change.
Right, and I think it depends on the company. I think it depends on the company and what the company needs, but I do feel like, some of the things that I've done, like I had a dinner last week with a CEO of an agency, and they have to really upskill their entire team, and so there's an innovation problem happening, right? So they're having an innovation problem, and to me, I think, so this is answering your question a little bit, Christian, also, but I do think that for companies to have, and a lot of companies do have now, innovation labs, right? Where you can test small things and, sort of, and have growth in those areas, right? I think you have to have innovation labs. I know L'Oreal has like a huge innovation lab. A lot of other, Nike obviously has an innovation lab, but to have an innovation lab, to me, is really important. Look, we have Web3. We have, now there's Be Real, right? Like the sort of Instagram competitor of like real authentic selfies. And, there's a lot of chatter. I hear people, damning the metaverse, and then also, rejecting the Be Real technology. But, marketers and advertisers have to get in there. Like, you have to get into the space. You have to understand. And if you have a strong story, a strong brand promise, right? A, a strong marketing engine, right? Then you should be able to pivot into all these different areas very quickly, right? I mean, you shouldn't have to start from scratch every single time a new kind of medium emerges, right? To me, it's all about like, what is the big vision? What is this, your differentiating positioning, and then being able to answer to that across all mediums.
Totally. I mean, I couldn't agree more strongly with that.
So we have about 4 more minutes. If anybody has any last questions for Steve, please hurry up and type in the comment box now. But Christian, thanks for your question. I hope we answered it. I know that I just talked about the metaverse a little bit, and are you interested in, like, where are you sitting with that? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm reading about it right now. I think the author's name is Matthew Ball.
Yes.
So I'm reading that book literally now.
Like during the interview, like while I'm talking,
No,
and you're reading, right? Okay.
Put the book down. No. But it's it's interesting. Yeah, I would say that for most marketers, that's probably, reading a book about it right now is probably the reasonable place to start. It's like, one takeaway is that there's not even like clarity around what it is. It's like there's a million different definitions. It's no one company like Facebook's going to own it, even though they're trying to co-opt that. But totally, like, I was saying to our team, it's like, hey, let's dig in a little bit on some of these gaming platforms. That's where this thing's going. And it's with Microsoft, partnering with Netflix, and that's going to just become a bigger. I think that was one of the rationales for their partnership, and that probably plays into into the metaverse down the road. But like, it starts there, so let's dip our toe in. We not a lot, but let's get smarter. So
right.
just doing that, even with not a lot of money, just
right. That's
immersed a little bit and talking about it. So we're like, we're doing really well with TikTok. It's not exactly the same. It's not the same thing, but it's sort of
it's a fairly, it's not new anymore, but it's
not new anymore, but it's new in our category in higher education. It's like, so like, we are by far, I think we've gotten 220,000 followers in a few months, and millions and millions of views. Like, and it's a totally different equation. Like, we hire these influencers. This has nothing to do with the metaverse, but we hire, we working with these influencers, and it's like, oh my God, when you just think about, I look at this and I'm like, to say marketing has changed over the years is a mild understatement on steroids.
Right. The engagement is so crazy on TikTok. It is insane. Like, you can,
but there's rules, but like, that is a unique environment that you need to get. And like, so back to the very, very beginning of our conversation, I certainly didn't get it, but we hired an agency and people who did, and they're kicking ass. So,
Right.
it's sort of thing. Dip your toe in, and and just keep it real and stay curious and try different things while you focus on your,
Right.
day to day, dance the numbers, and try, what I mean. Like, you got to try to do it all. Uh,
Right.
yeah. So,
And don't forgo your Hawaiian shirts. I mean, like,
well,
just,
no, of course not.
be you.
Be
Um,
you.
so thank you all who showed up today. We are going to go live every 2 weeks now. We were on hiatus for a bit to launch our new brand, but we are back in action. And you can find Work From Heart on our website, farfromtimid.com, or on YouTube, on our Far From Timid channel is where we'll upload all the Work From Heart videos. So please enjoy. And I really appreciate your time, Steve. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I learned a lot today. I hope everybody was able to learn something today. And I'd love feedback from the viewers. Any feedback on who you'd like to see in the future, and any format suggestions you have open. But thank you so much, Steve. It was such a delight.
And thank you for a great conversation. But more than that, just thanks for all the support, and expertise that you've brought. Like, I mentioned content marketing earlier. You really got us out of the gate there. So total gratitude. Great spending time with you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for
Thank
tuning in.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.